Hey everyone, welcome back. I have a special guest on, Jack Allwile. He has a YouTube channel on finance, on books, and we've connected over Twitter or now X. But yeah, I wanted to bring him on because I think his story kind of resonates a lot with mine. How money was kind of not something we talked about a lot when we were younger with our family, and now it's become a big part of our life. But welcome, Jack.
Thanks so much, Mark, for having me on. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, man. I mean, we've connected. I was on your channel. It was an honor being on that. And too bad something was up with my mic and my audio wasn't working the best at that time. But I think I've figured it out. But I want to bring you on here and kind of talk about your story and talk about what you're working on and what you're up to right now.
Awesome. Yeah, I guess a little bit of background. I grew up 100 miles north of Detroit, very small town. I loved playing soccer and doing math problems as a youngster. An interesting combination, but money was something we did talk a little bit about, and my parents had a couple rentals that we helped like fix up. So I did some tiling. I put one roof on with my uncle. So I had some exposure to real estate, but we never really got deep into the numbers. And I will say my parents were very encouraging of entrepreneurial activities. Like my mom would buy us candy in bulk and we would sell them at school. So that was another fun thing that we did as youngsters. But going into college, I liked math. I just figured I'd major in math. So I did that, and I picked up econ. And my junior year of school, I was introduced to the actuarial world. So I had a night class. It was an interest theory class that was taught by an actuary. So he was an actuary during the day and then taught this night class at night. And one thing about me was I was pretty shy growing up. And one of the pros of this path that I picked up on was basically if you just passed the exams, you'd be good. Like, and the lack of networking that I had done up until that point wouldn't really hurt me so much if I had been pretty good at just like math exams. So that appealed to me at that point. So I went down the actuarial route. Took me 11 years to pass all the exams, but along the way I discovered real estate, and that was perhaps mostly out of a hurdle or a stumbling block. I got fired in 2016 after moving down south. I didn't know anyone. I had trouble staying balanced in my life, getting new friends, and keeping up with my exams and work. So I got let go, and I took a trip to Europe, and I met my now wife, oddly enough, and I called this like my roots trip. So I wanted to see where my grandparents grew up. So I went to like Poland and Hungary, and then met my wife in Austria and Vienna. And so that was pretty eye-opening. And the big thing about that point in my life was that it gave me a time to pause and reflect. And I started reading a lot on that trip. I'd never been a reader up until that point. And that was like a pretty big game changer. And even though I was only reading on World War II stuff while visiting there, I was like, okay, like I'm kind of hooked. Like now I'm reading for my personal enjoyment and learning. And then, one thing led to another. I started reading about soccer books, and got into personal finance and real estate books. And then my brother started the house hack. And then I kind of got that idea in my head. As soon as I got another job and was financeable, I would buy a house and rent out the rooms. And so I did that in 2017. And a lot of this was just a lack of knowledge. I suppose I could have done this without a job perhaps, but that was my mindset at the time. But I learned strategies along the way and acquired 5 more units a year later through a couple going through a divorce. And those were up in Michigan by where I grew up. And now my current portfolio is 12 long-term rentals, all in Michigan. And then we have a short-term rental in Myrtle Beach. And the last set of properties we bought were in 2021. And I thought the rent ratios were looking less appealing after that. And I started getting into just flipping raw land. So I've been doing that in Arizona, more specifically Apache County near Petrified Forest National Park. And we can talk about that too. But yeah, that's what I'm working on. I love real estate and just talking about personal finance.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, so was there a book that kind of maybe flipped the switch for you? Like you said you started reading books and then you started getting to real estate a little bit more in finance. Was there a certain book that kind of flipped that switch for you?
Uh-huh. So there's a couple books I would say that were some are more conventional, like Cash Flow Quadrant. I oddly read before Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I remember like sitting out at a pool reading this book. I'm like, dang, this is how they're doing it. And but there was another book, and this was like when I was in Europe, um, and started dating my now wife. But there was a book called The Shortest History of Germany, oddly enough. And it goes in depth on the Weimar hyperinflation after World War One that eventually led to the rise of the Nazis. And there's the story of like, how the people in Weimar Germany are basically using those, I think they were marks at the time, basically as like wallpaper because they were like worth like nothing. And like you'd have to like a whole wheelbarrow of cash to buy some bread. And the people that were least affected by this hyperinflation were, well, one, the people that had nothing to begin with, like homeless people, just because what do they care? Like they have no savings. They're kind of just, living how they live and aren't affected. And then the other people that weren't really affected were the people that had real assets that they could just, if they needed to, just refinance at these inflated prices or if you had a business, you could just alter your prices along with the environment. The people that were absolutely crushed were the people that saved money and didn't put that money to use. And that was something that really triggered my mindset of I'm definitely not going to let this happen to me, or at least I'm going to do my darndest not to allow that.
Yeah, that sounds very familiar, like to kind of what's going on today.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of the game plan. You buy real assets, wait for the government to print more money, and then refinance at higher rates, and you don't have to pay taxes on that refi money. And that seems to be the playbook.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and so is that why you picked up that book, or was it
So
like
I
a?
originally picked up that book because I was dating my wife is Austrian, and I thought maybe if I'm going to, move things along, I should learn a little bit more about that part of the world.
That's amazing. I mean, huh? Yeah.
But yeah, it's totally random, but it had a profound effect on my mindset.
So is it kind of classified as a finance book or
No,
no?
actually, I have it right here. It's I don't know if
Oh,
you can
okay.
see it, but
Yeah.
I mean, the Weimar hyperinflation part is probably only 10 pages of this like 200-page book.
Okay.
But that was the part that resonated with me.
Wow. So your first property, sorry, I might have missed it, but that was a primary residence or you got a rental first?
No, it was a primary. It was so
Okay.
2017 in Charlotte, North Carolina. It was a 4-bed, 3.5 bathroom. It had a pool it has a pool in the backyard, and it was about to go into foreclosure. Like the pool, when I went to view it, it was like jet black, so it hadn't been maintained. But I mean, a lot of people told me to avoid pools at all costs. But I had just been a renter, and I was like, well, if I were to rent somewhere, I would also want it. I would want to have a pool. So I kind of came from it from that perspective. But a lot of people were telling me I should avoid it at all costs. And after cleaning it myself for a while, I can kind of see why. But eventually, I was able to hire help to work those things out. But yeah, it perhaps is more of a pain than I'd like to admit.
So you still have that property?
Yep, we still live here, but with no roommates. So my
Okay.
wife came over. We unsurprisingly had to kick the roommates out.
Well, that sounds like so your plan initially was, I mean, you were looking for a primary residence. It wasn't like you had a more like an investor's mindset at that time?
Well, actually, it was only investment because
Oh, okay.
I definitely would not have bought this just for myself. It's too big. It's not really where the action is. It's like probably 10 miles south of uptown Charlotte. It's still in Charlotte proper, but like I yeah. So it wouldn't like if I was just by myself, it would not be the area I would elect to
Mm.
live in. So I did it basically because I thought the numbers looked very good, and I saw my brother having some success when he did this in Nashville. So I decided I wanted to do that too.
Huh, that's amazing. So how did you go from rentals and then now you have like a short-term rental into flipping land?
So when the prices, the just regular or the at least the markets I was looking in, the prices were getting so high compared to the rents, it just didn't seem as attractive to me. So I still like real estate. I wanted to learn more. And there was a podcast. It's called the Real Freedom Podcast with Mike Swenson. He had a guest on, Mark Podolsky, who goes by the Land Geek, and he was describing the systems he had in place to flip land. And I thought it sounded cool, so I signed up for the Land Geeks class on just learning the systems behind flipping land. And basically, the playbook is you pick a county and you send letters out to out of state owners at about quarter of the price of what you think it would retail for. Yeah, so the playbook on flipping land is there's a system for mailing to out of state owners, and the idea is that you would put a price on a quarter of what you think it would retail for, and typically get like 1% of those people to accept that deal. And then I'll either sell them to other investors at about 50 cents on the dollar, like at a wholesale price, or try to sell them to retail either for cash or on like a terms deal. And I've been doing that like a year and a half now. It's definitely more active. And but I've been learning a lot because I do a lot of the title search on my own. So I've learned to make the deeds and the affidavits on my own without really without help, essentially. So I can cut out some of those costs, and it's been fun. Learn a little bit about other parts of the country, and yeah, it's been fun.
I love it. So how did you end up like picking Arizona?
So I picked Arizona. So one of the things in the class was, there's the county selection process. And one of the counties I remember originally looking at was in Arkansas. The thing that I found in Arkansas, though, was it was hard to look up the ownership and the chain of title. It wasn't as transparent. I think you would basically, essentially, it looked like you had to pay someone to get that information. You would have had to pay some title search. But in Arizona is very online friendly. I can, just log in and like go parcel by parcel and look up who owns what. And then you can do a document search to see how it's exchanged ownership over the years. So I just found it more user friendly, online friendly. And I guess I had the thought, like, if I was like overseas or traveling, it was more manageable just being able to do it myself, a lot of that stuff. So that's kind of how I picked it. It seems like out west is very popular. Utah, Nevada, parts of California, parts of Texas. But yeah, I mean, there were some states I remember from the class that they said to avoid like 100%, but I'm kind of blanking on what those are. But I've mostly just been working in Arizona. I mean, I might venture a little bit out just for some diversification or learn something different about a different part of the country. But yeah, right now I'm just in Arizona.
Was there something that kind of, turned on that light bulb for you for the land flipping? Like, is this, I don't know, it doesn't seem very common to me. You hear people, syndications, short term rentals, fix and flips, but land flipping, I don't hear too many people talking about it.
Yeah, I heard Mark Podolsky on the Real Freedom podcast, and then I probably heard him two or three more times before I genuinely thought about it. And at the time, when my wife came over here after we got married, she was not allowed to work. So that was like another thing, like that I was trying to think about, like things that maybe she could do also. And so it was kind of just something this class we took together. So something we could do and talk about, and maybe so she didn't go insane just sitting around. So yeah, that's kind of how I got into it. But we also, I mean, I signed us up for like a flipping or like an estimating rehab cost like seminar. So that was 2 days recently, and I think the part of flips that I haven't really gotten my head around is like that estimating the rehab budget. That's kind of what's deterred me from doing like a big project. So recently we went and did like an estimating rehab costs, basically a class. It was like a 2-day crash course where they take you around by bus to their different flips and then show you their rubric for estimating. And then you basically independently get to come up with the rehab budget. So you just feel a little more confident. So I think going forward, it's definitely something I'm going to look into. But yeah, I kind of, I don't know. But the land flipping just seemed a little bit different in the sense it seemed like there were more systems than what I had been accustomed to. Like this mailing system, I thought maybe I could use it for long-term or like rentals down the road. But I just didn't know what types of systems or how they go about going. Yeah, I wanted to know, I guess, more about their systems than anything else.
I love it. I think that's something that a lot of people don't realize is that there's so many, different avenues in real estate, whether it's, like you're saying, land flipping, fix and flip, short-term rentals. And, you just got to find the one that resonates with you, or that, you maybe have some kind of little passion about, but it just makes it a lot easier for you to learn about it. And, it takes having some failures in it a little more acceptable, especially if it's something you enjoy. So that's great that you found something that, you found some enjoyment doing, and, hopefully your wife is maybe still doing it with you. But,
I guess another thing I'd say that was attractive about this is that the risk of failure was very low, in the sense that a lot of these parcels are very cheap. I mean, we're talking like $4,000 for 1 acre. I mean, it really is like the middle of the desert. And I guess that was another attractive thing, that like it's something I could learn, but the risk of like the cost if something were to go wrong really wasn't that high.
is there a big holding cost? Like, so let's say you got this land.
Mhm.
Is there like a holding cost?
So yeah, so like most of my 1 acre parcels in Apache County, the taxes I think are like basically like $10 a year. So that would that's all the holding cost. Like you don't need insurance. You don't have to worry about tenants doing anything or any sort of structural. There's nothing on the land. So there really aren't, not really much to the holding costs.
So, like, for example, why hasn't someone else maybe purchased it sooner? Or like the people that do buy it from you, are they like building homes on it, or what are they doing with the land?
Yeah, so there's one family I've helped expand their farm, and I didn't even know you could really have a farm in Arizona desert, but they have a operating little farm for their family. And so that's one example. There's other people that have used it as campsites. Like there was a guy that lived in California but had family in Texas, and he always would cut across this like area, and he just wanted a cheap place to stay. So he would just pitch his tent like, a couple times a year and not have to pay for a hotel. I don't know how efficient that really is, but he gets to participate in the possible appreciation, and he gets a cheap hotel, a campsite for the night. And there are other people that want to combat the risk of inflation. So they just want to save in something that's real, but they don't want to deal with like tenants. So they just want a store of value in some way. And then there's people that do recreational activities like four-wheelers and shooting their guns. So it kind of runs the gambit of what they find attractive in the land. But yeah, that's what they're doing with it. Most people have not built, from my experience, online, but you could. You would have to drill a well,
Yeah.
which is in this area, it could be 20-25 grand just for the well, and you would need septic field, and you would need to run the wires to that plot if there's not close electricity.
So once you find a piece of land that's attractive for you, it makes sense for you. Once you get it, acquire it, do you go out and actively pursue a buyer, or you kind of just sit back and wait for someone to reach out to you?
So typically, once I get land deeded to me, I will send neighbor letters. And the idea is, and most of these people didn't receive one of my initial offerings because, well, hopefully the neighbors are from Arizona, because I'm mailing to out-of-state owners at quarter on the dollar. So they might get irritated if I'm now offering them this land at the full price. But normally the neighbor letters, I give them like a slight discount, just saying like, we have this land, we're shopping it around to the neighbors, see if you want it before we start marketing it on the Facebook groups. But there's a lot of Facebook groups geared towards off-gridders or just vacant land, mobile home type Facebook groups that I'll market it on. And there's also some investor groups where I can post like, I'm willing to wholesale this, at this price. This is what I think it would retail for. And that kind of just builds liquidity in the whole system. So if you really needed cash, you could probably just sell it to another investor and just offload it. And a lot of people do that. They just buy them from the mailers and then sell them to other investors. And there's also investors that just buy wholesale that have really good like marketing machines and will just buy them wholesale, and they don't want to deal with all the mailers and just sell them to the market.
What about like taxes? Because like for depreciation, you can't depreciate the land value. Is there any tax benefits for holding the land?
This might be over my head on the accounting.
Okay.
You're right. Since there's no structure,
Yeah.
there's not really a benefit like you would see in like a traditional construction, from my understanding.
Interesting. Yeah. Like I said, I've never really come across anyone doing land flipping. So it's so interesting to me. I think, I saw you put something on Twitter and I was like, oh man, what's he doing? What's he working on now? Yeah. But in the beginning, you mentioned reading Cash Flow Quadrant by, Robert Kiyosaki. Did you ever end up reading Rich Dad Poor Dad?
We did. We actually did an episode on the Brothers on Books podcast on that one.
Let's talk about this. So what's this other podcast you have?
So it's called The Brothers on Books, and my brother and I started. It's essentially a virtual book club, just with two members, my brother and I, and we read books and discuss them. They're predominantly nonfiction. There's a lot of there are personal finance books, but we do a lot of like social topics. I'm trying to think. We've done a couple of fiction books. And we've had some really good guests.
I see a Tom Brady book you just did.
We did. Unfortunately, we couldn't snag Tom to come on, but we had fun.
He's retired anyways.
We had fun reading that book. We've had a bunch of Bitcoin people on. We had Ivy Zelman, who's deep into real estate. She's been interviewed on like CNBC and a lot of like Kramer, a lot of those shows. So that was pretty cool to have her take. And we've had some very cool guests.
Yeah. So what's the plan for all that? Like, your books podcast, your finance podcast. Like, what's the vision for you? Like, what's the end game for
Mm-hmm.
you?
For now, it's kind of, I would say it's more just a hobby. I really like it, but I want to spread the word. And the YouTube, I take a little more seriously. Like as soon as I discovered Twitter and started like chatting with you and some of the others, I'm like, okay, if I start a YouTube channel, maybe people will be more inclined to like talk with me, and it'll be easier to make connections. And who knows how they could pay off down the road, and just making friends. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I feel like I'm learning a lot having these discussions. So I kind of just kind of like a karma believer that you just put yourself out there and try to make things happen. Eventually, something will happen, and you'll get some real value out of it.
So for you, what was the hardest thing getting started for your YouTube channel?
Well, I will say I posted relatively religiously for like a year and had like 20 subscribers. No, I wasn't really like active, because like honestly, I'm still a little bit embarrassed on like my production value. Like I probably need to update my background, and so I wasn't really advertising it. But at the time, it was just me going through whatever topics I felt like, doing a lot of real estate, Bitcoin, um, financing topics. But as soon as I started getting on Twitter and asking people to come on, that's when I started noticing a little bit more traction, getting a little bit more engagement. But I think the biggest thing was just, it's kind of like you're putting things out into the universe, and like nothing's coming back. Like no one's really like listening, or it's kind of just tough to just keep going. And who knows? I mean, it still might not be successful, but I at least feel like I'm giving a little more and I'm getting a little more out of it.
Yeah, I feel you. I mean, yeah, it's a lot of work and not a lot of return, but it's fun. I mean, I'm having fun doing it. Like you say,
Yeah,
yeah, connecting with different people, and I think that's what it's all about. And yeah, if it does get big, then great. But I like the connection that we're all making, and yeah, like you said, the background and all that. I mean, that's down the road for me.
yeah,
Hopefully, I just want to get started, and I think that's kind of your mindset also.
yeah. I will say the Brothers on Books podcast probably helped me a little bit starting the YouTube channel, just in the sense like I kind of saw how we did that, and just with like, yeah, just getting started. Yeah, because half the battle is just getting started, like getting over that hump. And so when I saw like us do that, I was like, okay, well, I could do this if I wanted. So sometimes you just have to, yeah, get a little taste of what it's like.
Yeah, yeah. So, do you, I guess, have any writing your own book in the future?
So I have written a
Ah,
couple books. They are, so one is geared towards actuarial students. This was a journal I put together. So I had failed I think it was the sixth exam 3 times. And these exams are not offered frequently. It's like twice a year. So it's incredibly frustrating when you fail. And I failed the sixth exam 3 times. I failed the seventh exam 3 times. And then I failed the eighth exam 2 times. But I think it was the seventh exam. After I failed 3 times, I started, number one, journaling. And I also started training for a half marathon, which it sounds counterintuitive. Like some of my friends are like, well, you just need to like study more. And I'm like, but I was kind of feeling like I was losing balance in my life. And I was like, and I used to play a ton of soccer, and I felt like I was kind of getting away from some sort of physical endeavor. And I thought as soon as I started training for the half marathon and journaling, the progress I was seeing through the physical activity was translating to my studying. And I ended up passing that next sitting. And I just felt a little bit more in control of my progress. I mean, the actual exams are very hard. And like sometimes like you can study all day, every day, at the end of the day, the exam's only 10 questions and they can be very random sections of the syllabus. And it's also, it's kind of how the other people on that sitting are doing. So it's kind of, a lottery in some ways. I mean, you would not pass if you didn't study at all, but you can be very prepared and still fail. So that was something I tried to get the message out. And I put this journal together. It's called 15 Weeks to Pass an Actuarial Exam. And I thought it helped me tremendously. So I put it out there. And then another book that
You're
was very
laughing,
fun.
huh?
It was a very fun passion project. So the skills I learned as an actuary, I got very good in Excel and I got very good with VBA. VBA is the coding language to automate mundane tasks in Excel. And I liked doing simulations. So I thought I could use some data. And there was another soccer book I had read called Soccernomics. And there was one other by the same author. The names escaped me, but they did a study on what countries use their resources the best. And this study triggered something in me. It was like, well, wow, I could use data like this, try to predict these games. And so what I did is I took a bunch of FIFA data and I modeled the World Cup, and I ended up betting in 2018, which was a lot of money at the time for me. I bet like $6,000 over, I think it was like 30 or 40 bets. And I used this model to help bet. And I put my kind of findings and what I learned through the process into a book called Make Better Bets. Because I will be fully transparent. I lost a little bit of money, even though we did pick the winner. We had a bet on France, but it was really fun, and I really enjoyed it. And honestly, I probably would have been better suited betting on like the Premier League or a league where there's more data, not something that's so infrequent like the World Cup. But with the way my study schedule was, the World Cup was the best thing that I could have bet. And it just made it dramatically more fun. And I still like laugh and chuckle because I ended up to place these bets because it wasn't legal at the time. I had to fly to Delaware. I remember flying into Philly, taking a car to Delaware Downs to make these bets. And it was the most money I'd ever held in cash in my hands. And I just remember being scared. But it was a lot of fun. And I wrote the book with the thought of like, this book is what I wish I could have read like 10 years prior. Like, it was something that if I had started earlier, I might have put more effort into, and just like putting something for like actuaries or stats driven people, to give them a framework to build off of, I guess. But it was a very fun project.
It sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Apparently, you haven't wrote one on your fantasy football, though. I mean,
that's true. I don't know if people want to take my advice on that.
but yes, we're in a league together. We joined it over X, and it's a lot of fun. But you're not doing too well right now. But I forget. Did you auto draft?
I did. I will blame you on that because my other league I drafted. I'm very Chiefs heavy, but it's been boom or bust this year with them. But I'm second place in my other league, and I did actively draft that one.
All right. Well, it was a lot of fun catching up. And like I said, I see you doing so much things on X and social media. So I was like, oh man, I gotta catch up with him. I can't even keep track of you. I don't know what you're doing now. But before you go, I'm gonna put you on the spot. We don't have time to really go over this, but is there we'll simplify a little bit. Is there a finance book that you would recommend to maybe someone that wants to get started in changing their finances?
I'm looking at my bookshelf right now. I think I think I really like The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. I thought that was a phenomenal book. And the more I've read on finance, the more I think it doesn't really belong in a math class. It does really belong in a psychology class. So that book stands out to me. I would also recommend Atomic Habits in terms of just being consistent with your habits and acquiring good habits. So I would, and I think that helps a lot towards finance. And then another thing I would do is track your net worth. That has, I would say that has improved my finances better than any other single thing that I can think of. And I update my net. I have in Excel, just assets, liabilities, net worth, and I have all the outstanding loans I have, so I can see how the balances are running off. And if I'm lending money, I can see how much interest is coming in. So I think that activity is the number one activity I would recommend everyone do to really bring your finances front of mind.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. I mean, yeah, lots changed for me too. Like, you touched on it earlier, you never really were into reading books and whatnot. And, I was the same way. I always joke about it that I probably didn't read a book since graduated high school, college. And then all of a sudden, yeah, you find something you're interested in again, and, you start reading, and, it's enjoyable, and you realize that there's a lot to learn. But definitely audiobooks make it a lot easier now. You can do multiple things, but yeah, definitely, books are super important and super helpful. Before you go, I did see one last kind of tweet you're talking about, but and it's something that really opened my eyes for finances too, and you didn't really touch on it, so I want to see. Mm-hmm. So are you lending money also?
Like I do lend money.
Okay.
I've lent my mother or my brother on some of his real estate deals. I currently have lent to some other land investors actually, and I will not pretend to be an expert. I probably did not get the proper paperwork per se on some of these, but I'm getting more involved. There's a site called Private Money Club. It was brought on by Chris Naugle, who I started following through his infinite banking videos that I've also become very interested in and participate in. So I'm very involved in that. And I think I'm going to be taking a class on being like a better lender, like getting the proper collateral and paperwork, and God forbid the borrower were to die, how do you secure yourself that way, getting yourself on the insurance policy. So I do lend. I do more borrowing, but I eventually would like to move over to more of the lending side.
Yeah, I'm not worried about all the paperwork stuff, but I was more intrigued by how you were talking about, just that arbitrage of spread. Like
Sure.
if I'm borrowing money at this, but I'm going to lend it out. Like, if you told someone, oh yeah, I'm paying 8% interest on something, they might look at you like, why are you paying 8% interest, right? But they don't realize you might be lending it out for 12%, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
another common thing, and this like I think about this more if you have a very stable asset, and this is why I actually, and we didn't touch on this, but like the infinite banking, the whole life policies that have a very stable crediting rate. So say if you had like 200 grand in cash value, and that is increasing at 4%. So, that's 8 grand. And if you were to borrow 100 grand with that as the collateral at 5%, well, you're only paying 5% in interest, but you're getting eight grand in interest off of, because it's the full amount. It's still, it's good leverage.
Yeah. Keep talking about infinite banking because nobody believes in it.
Sure. So, and I have no skin in this. Like I do not sell, and I'm one of the few people I feel that really use it that don't sell it. So I feel like it carries more weight coming from me because I have nothing to benefit from anyone using this. But it is, and back to the history of Germany, like in being able to borrow against real assets. And this is primarily why I liked real estate, because you have a real asset that you can borrow against. But the thing with real estate is, if you have a house, the crediting mechanism is whatever the market's doing. So you might have a $200,000 house, but it might go, it might go up 10%, but it also might go down 20%. And so the attractive thing about whole life policies from a mutual insurance company is that by law, there is a minimum crediting rate, and that is stable. That is by law, it cannot go down. So you would be borrowing against cash value that cannot go down. And that in my mind, it's just another asset to borrow against that has it might not be as sexy of a crediting rate, or it might not be as high of a flyer, but it's stable and it's something you can count on. And I feel like a lot of people talk about putting money into things, but don't really talk about when they need to take it out. And if you need to take it out, you have to think about that side of the equation too. And I like infinite banking for that reason, because it's just another way to use debt, and the asset is very stable. So that's why I'm a fan of it.
It's just another tool, but so much people don't believe in it, and so many people think it's a scam, and they don't understand it, I think. But it's just another vehicle to store your money, and like you're saying, it's another tool to borrow against. And a lot of times too, it's an easier way to borrow, because you may have a home or property to take equity out, but you got to go through paperwork and maybe an appraisal and your credit. But if you're going to borrow off your whole life policy, it's basically 2 clicks maybe.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great point, because I didn't touch on that, but that was really another thing, because when I've tried to refinance properties, it's not always easy. Like some people think they can just take out equity like just at will, but it's not always super straightforward. So it really is like a couple clicks, and I get the check like in my, the money's in my account the next day. So there is something to be said for that.
Yeah. What if you had an opportunity, 2 weeks from now, say somebody's, I want you to buy this off of me, but you have 2 weeks to get the money, You're not going to be able to get that out of your rental property or get the equity out that quickly. So, but you can get out of your whole life policy fairly easily. So, but we can talk about this another time maybe. But we can have you back on. I can jump on your channel with better audio this time, because last time it was my fault, man. But
I guess I will say, if people are interested in the infinite banking, there is one book that is very good, and it's called I'm looking to see if I can pull it for you, but it's called Becoming Your Own Banker by R. Nelson Nash. And that's like the holy grail of infinite banking. So I would recommend that. Yep.
Yeah. Too bad too many people, why? Because Dave Ramsey always says it's a scam. So everyone believes Ramsey, so they don't like it. But I mean, the wealthy are using it, and it's just like you say, it's just another tool, right?
Yep.
But we'll do this again, man. It's always fun, man, catching up. And I mean, I probably won't see you in the fantasy football playoffs or anything, but your Lions are doing good. Your Lions are doing good. So I can't say too much about that, but we'll do it again, man. Thanks for coming on.
We will. Thanks so much for having me, Mark.
All right, man. Okay, Jack.